In this second volume within the Chronicles of Narnia, Lewis explores faith itself, time as a construct, and consciousness, and how consciousness actually constructs the very idea of time, or at least how time is perceived and actually is executed within reality. And then, of course, the power of nature, which is one of his favorite topics. It is one of the most epic series of all time, and one of the most important Christian ones as well. So I will go over some of the important elements that make it stand out and kind of entice you to get it. So stay tuned. Welcome to biblioCultist, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, comment on the video, and I'll drop my Ko-Fi account on the side where you can check out my merch store and donate if you wish, and also below my X account if you want to have a discussion. I always have to mention these things so that you can help me grow this channel. There are a lot of great book review channels out there, but I think what I'm doing here is also interesting and particular because I tend to focus more on the books that I'm going through or that I think should be read, and most other channels focus more on the books that are trending. And obviously that's going to increase their visibility a lot faster than mine. But if you like the kind of books that I'm discussing and the topics that I address, then, supporting the channel by subscribing or sharing it really helps out. And again, I always appreciate it. In this episode, I'm going over Prince Caspian by C.S. Lewis, which is the second book in the publication order. Now, a lot of people, like I've said in the first edition in my playlist on Chronicles of Narnia, like to read the book on the publisher's suggested sequence, but Lewis himself had different opinions on this, but the publication history seems to me to be a very historically accurate way of reading it. It's up to you. You can read it however you want. The edition that I have is from HarperCollins, 2007, and keep in mind this book was published originally in 1951. So in this story, the children return to Narnia, but time has affected Narnia itself. Everything seems to be different, decayed, changed in a dramatic way. And through this particular change, they're able to explore their own destiny and the history within Narnia itself. And I think this book actually brings Narnia to life in a particular way, because before it kind of remained in a more fantastical kind of dynamic. But now in Prince Caspian, it brings it to life because it gives you a political contrast between that Narnia and this one. And because it explores time, perception, and how it matters in the way that we engage history, and how we are on a thin thread navigating contingencies and working our way through meaning, then as a novel, it's actually very sophisticated. Now, of course, you can kind of bypass that if you want when you read it, but you should consider the whole point of this, right? Because the children arrive at a time where there's a history of themselves. So they were part of a golden age that doesn't exist anymore. And it makes me think of how we perceive golden ages ourselves. To some people, the past was a lot better than the present. And like the children, we are born and raised in a way that as we look backwards, as we see the cultural remnants of the past, the languages of the past, the history, the culture, the ruins, it makes us feel that we have lost something, even if we can't put our finger on it. Now, there's another group of people that ideologically teach that everything in the past was worse, horrible, retrograde, perverse, whatever adjective you want to add to it. But of course, these people, even though believe this, they don't actually behave in this fashion. They tend to behave in a way that they're constantly stressed out because the modern world somehow needs to be fixed or taken to a utopia. So that there seems to be a consensus in the modern age by both sides of the fence that the modern world is horrible and needs to be fixed, changed in one way or the other. And I think this novel kind of addresses that feeling. Now, of course, because this book has a traditionalist bent, it would agree more with my point of view that we did lose something that was better in a lot of ways. And I think reality bears that out. Now, of course, the time factor is important because is it only an issue of perception, or is there an actual fiber in time that allows us to live in this universe in a chronological way? Is it possible to skip chronological time? And that would be a theological point. Lewis is a Christian and his conception of time is linear. But even if it is, in this novel, he still explores the possibility that it isn't, because with God, nothing is chronological. He is beyond space and time. Now, the novel also explores what happens to humans when faced with raw nature. Are we afraid of reality itself because it is understandable? We know the world is raw, violent, or are we afraid of its mysteries? And this is a great topic also that Lewis is engaging us here, because you also see two ways of expressing this dynamic with nature. You have a group of people that view nature as transparent, as bold and aggressive in might is right, survival of the fittest, the Darwinist perception of everything. That it doesn't belong to him. Human beings have been around for thousands upon thousands of years before Darwin came about. Darwin was just expressing what he observed, and obviously with his own perception, with his own twist. And there are people that look at nature in this way, as a transparent, mechanical thing that engages us with very basic natural laws, and we're just compelled to them. There's another way of looking at nature, which is packed with mystery and dark energy, that there's something hidden underneath that we just don't perceive right away, that it is alive somehow. And some people see nature as a living being. But the point is, which one is it? Is it both? And this novel explores that, because during this time period in Narnia, the animals are quiet. Nature seems to have been muted in a way, where at least human beings cannot perceive it the same way. And they talk about it as a myth, as a dangerous past, a strange, weird time period in Narnia's history in which nature behaved in a peculiar way. But how about the nature of men as well? Here's a quote. "Wouldn't it be dreadful if someday in our own world, at home, men started going wild inside, like the animals here, and still look like men, so that you never know which were which? We've got enough to bother about here and now in Narnia," said the practical Susan, "without imagining things like that." So you see there, nature within man is also dangerous, wild, aggressive, even perverse. And again, you see some people that see our nature as being unjust, unfair, unequitable, and wish to snuff it out. And they believe with machines and civilization you can do this. To others, nature is sacred, and therefore this particular aspect of our personality is not evil. It is just part of this beautiful reality. But it has its scars. It has the freckles of aggression and the dark magic of power. So again, he's exploring there, which one is it? Or is it both? As I have mentioned before, the Chronicles of Narnia is a transparently Christian allegorical series. It explores how God is involved in our lives in a fashion that allows free will at high levels and the flexible volition of each individual, which itself is quite a modern understanding, of course, at least theologically. Because people tend to forget that even though Christianity is today seen as an individualistic religion in a way, it really isn't in its origin. Yes, the soul is judged individually in Christianity, although if you trace the history of this particular theological doctrine, you'll see that collective judgment was actually a primary element. You see that because prior to the medieval theological renaissance with scholasticism and all its branches, and I'm talking about in the West in particular, you have the notion of a single judgment, a collective judgment at the end of time. Everyone is raised, everyone's taken to the judge, everyone's publicly humiliated or praised, and this all happened as a group. Nations are judged as groups, etc. But then the issue came about of what happens to the individual. Is he judged individually first? It's called the particular judgment. And after the particular judgment, then you're put back into bodies raised and judged again. And that is the current doctrine. But that appears to be a development. But even if you don't want to see it as a development, if you find it offensive for me to call it a development, you still have to admit that the collective judgment is still there. It is a core value. Jesus is speaking to a group of people. He is addressing nations. He is addressing families. So the individual is always present without a doubt, but this form of individualist Christianity was non-existent. So yes, you do have certain levels of free will, but they're always in a context and they're always part of a limited manifestation of this notion. God will give you the choices. The choices are not just a free-for-all. Choices themselves are pre-selected, and you're choosing within a particular volitional buffet, and you're doing the selecting. So God is highly involved in our lives because the entire spectrum of reality has been already designed. And he even gets involved in our tiny decisions based on this novel. So he is a constant presence. Another topic in this novel that is great to explore is aristocracy, the very notion of nobility, what it truly means to be noble. And of course, this is a topic that should be explored more often because in the modern world, with few exceptions, we are quite distant from nobility. Nobility of blood, nobility of tradition. It's still there in some places, the spirit of considering lineages as sacred or considering certain cultures to be of noble origin, certain attitudes, etc. Everything has been dropped down to a common denominator so that it's easier to sell products to the masses. The more diversity you have, the more complex it is to advertise and promote your garbage, so that you have to bring everyone to share a common culture. Not because you love the universe and you want everyone to sing Kumbaya holding hands, but because you want to sell them in an easier fashion. It has no noble intent. It has actually a commercial, perverse intent. The destruction of diversity for the sake of product consumption. The spirit of nobility is religious, spiritual. It contends with the idea of duty and beauty and order. So it appeals to higher levels of consciousness and of existence. It's also naturalistic because it appeals to the natural hierarchy that you see in nature, but within a moral context, which is even higher. It's aspirational. So a novel like this for a child is good because it allows them to see the possibility instead of seeing everything as equalizing or downgraded to a point in which everyone just consumes the same trash for the sake of unity, which never works because human beings are naturally inclined towards preferences and particularities, so that you just create tiny little micros that conflict with each other and think one is better than the other, but for no reason except that they consume something better than the other. At least something to think about. Now, I love the notion and possibility alluded in this book that at some point in history, nature was alive. It spoke with magic, and the Spirit of God itself was within this nature. I think Lewis meant this beyond the allusion to Eden, of course. That if we just listen with our hearts, we can hear life breathe and communicate openly. And those of us that love nature, or at least enjoy being exposed to it, we can agree that if you just listen hard enough, you can feel and sense its life. But Narnia manifests this in a very dramatic way. Now, there's this quote that I'm going to read now that I think it's interesting because it sounds like a type of covenantal language. that is also collective, as I mentioned earlier. "Ah," roared Aslan, "you have conquered me. You have great hearts, not for the sake of your dignity, Reapy Cheap, but for the love that is between you and your people, and still more for the kindness your people showed me long ago when you ate away the cords that bound me on the stone table. And it was then, though you have long forgotten it, that you began to be talking mice. You shall have your tale again." Now this character, Reapy Cheap, is such a great, beautiful character because it's a children's story. Talking animals are always going to be appealing. But this particular creature is a knight with honor and dignity and nobility. And he's using the lowliest type of animal to present this character, which I also think is something beautiful to do. But if you notice, Aslan, which is, as you know, the representative of Christ, of God himself, is speaking about a covenant that was made with this race in particular, as a group, as a collective, because they were there at the time that he was sacrificed. Now, the Bible is packed with covenantal language, covenants that are presented, covenants that are engaged in, and covenants that are broken. Most covenants in the Bible are conditional. If you do this, I will do that. If you don't do this, I will not do this, or I will do this as punishment, etc. And covenantal language is important to understand because in the modern world, it is used constantly to justify atrocities and all kinds of ridiculous conclusions. If you just read the document as it is, with the understanding that most of these covenants are conditional, and that you must correctly identify the participants of the covenant, which is another problem in this kind of language, then a lot of people would still be able to have a good life. But covenantal language is powerful because it is a collective language. These are contracts between God and groups of people. Those that follow Aslan, Christ, they have a covenant. They have to fulfill certain obligations. And here Aslan is obliged to this particular group of people because they were there. They were loyal to him. And he gave them the gift of speech, etc. So it's a very interesting allusion that he's putting in this novel that I think merits a little bit more of thought. So obviously, you must be aware that this is in actuality a children's book, but it carries such sublime beauty and profound theological insights that it should be read by everyone, adults, children, it doesn't matter. I highly suggest you get it in a box set because that way you could just read it back to back. They're very easy books to read. And if you don't have children now, but you have them in the future, or if you have little cousins or whatever, you can lend it to them and they'll really derive a lot of benefit from it. And a lot of great conversations will come out of it. And like I mentioned, you can read it chronologically or however you want. So hopefully you're enjoying this series. If you want to see the whole thing, just go to the Chronicles of Narnia playlist on my channel and you should be able to go through the entire thing once I'm done. And I'll little by little get through the whole thing. So please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, comment on the video. Thank you for being with me. See you next time.